Hello, Dostoevsky lovers. It's me, Patrick Bergman. Now you're in for the last book, The Miscarriage of Justice, book 12. It's the longest book, and it's about mainly the trial of Mitya. It seems like everyone woke up suddenly and said, I need to appear in the trial and tell everyone how I feel about anything. And who's guilty or not? It's a long book. A lot of people are talking, so pay attention. And I'll see you at the end.
The solemn hour arrives heavy with consequence. Within cramped walls humanity's complex drama unfolds under the law's stern gaze. Accusations fly, reputations falter and revive, yet truth eludes simple verdicts, ever ambiguous. For in this crucible of justice deeper reckonings stir. Public spectacle masks private anguish as each soul weighs its own guilt. Theirs is no trial by peers, but an inner tribunal which none can escape. Let us enter reverently, laying aside certitudes, to witness this imperfect mirror of justice. Conscience alone can meet unflinching judgment. Perhaps among these flawed proceedings, glimpses of a higher court await. Dmitry Karamazov's trial has drawn attention from all over Russia, with people flocking in from numerous cities, including Moscow and Petersburg. The popularity of the trial leads to a quick selling of tickets among lawyers, noblemen, and ladies. The ladies, in particular, favored Dmitry's acquittal, possibly due to his reputation as a conqueror of women's hearts. Katerina Ivanovna and Grushenka are also under the intense scrutiny of the audience, particularly the ladies. They see Katerina as an intriguing figure and consider Grushenka as the person responsible for the downfall of both Fyodor Pavlovich and his son. The arrival of the famous lawyer Fetyukovich is a cause of excitement. Fetyukovich is known for his exceptional legal talents, which reportedly has the prosecutor Ippolit Kirillovich worried about the potential negative impact on his career. The courtroom is described as a lofty space, with the jury on the right of the judges and the defendant and his attorney on the left. In the center are the pieces of material evidence, including the brass pestle, Fyodor's bloody dressing gown, and Dmitry's blood-stained clothes. When asked for his plea, Dmitry pleads guilty, but only to drunkenness and depravity. This gives an initial insight into his approach to his defense during the trial. The trial is treated as a spectacle and a source of entertainment, with tickets being sold to the event. The scandalous nature of the crime and the involvement of famous attorneys have made this case a hot topic of interest across the country. The predominantly female audience's preference for Dmitry highlights the prevailing sexist norms of the period. Rather than holding Dmitry accountable for his actions, they blame Grushenka, seeing her as the instigator of the tragic events. The legal authorities in the court each have their own motivations. The judge is interested in overseeing a case that could influence the fate of Russia, whereas the lawyers are primarily concerned about how the case could enhance their reputations. The positioning of Dmitry on the left side of the court is rich in symbolic meaning, reminiscent of the biblical tradition where the guilty are sent to Christ's left side. However, in this context, it's used ironically, as Dmitry is actually innocent of the murder charge. Despite the mounting evidence against him and the fact that he has wronged many people, Dmitry continues to assert his innocence in regards to the core accusation of murder. Grigory testifies about Fyodor's deception of Dmitry over his settlement, and recounts the scene of Dmitry's attack on his father. He describes Smerdyakov as a capable but godless man. Grigory's testimony about the open garden door and his lack of knowledge regarding the envelope raise questions, especially when it's revealed that he consumed vodka-laced balm, which could have affected his alertness. Rakitin takes the stand next, detailing Dmitry's actions at the Metropolis Tavern and his assault on Captain Snegiryov. He uses eloquent language to paint a negative image of Dmitry, but his credibility is diminished when Fetyukovich reveals that Rakitin accepted money from Grushenka to bring her Alexei Karamazov. Captain Snegiryov's testimony provides an emotional element to the proceedings. He's visibly distraught, and even though he's there to speak about Dmitri's brutality towards him, he refuses to do so out of respect for his son Ilyusha's wishes, causing a laughter stir in the court. The innkeeper Borisik testifies about witnessing Dmitri with 3,000 rubles. However, Fetyukovich casts doubt on his integrity by accusing him of keeping 100 rubles that Dmitri dropped. The Panier testify that Dmitri offered them a large sum of money, but Fetyukovich reveals their dishonesty during a card game as part of his strategy to morally taint all dangerous witnesses. Grigory's testimony conveys sympathy for Dmitri, as he acknowledges that Dmitri was unfairly treated by Fyodor. However, his credibility suffers when Fetyukovich reveals that he was under the influence of alcohol during a crucial moment. Despite this, Dmitri upholds Grigory's honesty, demonstrating his value of honor. Rakitin uses his storytelling abilities to sway the jury against Dmitri, portraying him as a villainous character. His lack of loyalty and trustworthiness is highlighted, particularly when Fetyukovich uncovers his dishonest actions, undermining Rakitin's narrative and exposing his true character. Captain Snegiryov is presented as a tragic figure, ridiculed by society due to a single mistake that resulted in his impoverishment. The public's harsh response to him exposes their unforgiving nature. Like Rakitin, Borisik is revealed to be another deceitful character who portrayed himself as an ally to Dmitri while harboring ill intentions. The reasons for Borisik's animosity remain unclear, unlike Rakitin's evident envy of the Karamazovs' influence. Fetyukovich showcases his legal prowess through his tactical approach to the case. Instead of focusing solely on proving Dmitri's innocence, he effectively discredits the credibility of Dmitri's accusers, shedding doubt on their testimonies and integrity. The chapter discusses the expert testimonies of the three doctors. Herzenstube affirms Dmitri's mental abnormality, expressing sympathy for him and reminiscing about his good-hearted nature in his youth. The Moscow doctor concurs, stating Dmitri's condition as highly abnormal and attributes his actions to mania and fits of passion triggered by the subject of the 3,000 rubles. Contrarily, Vavinsky perceives Dmitri's state as normal, attributing his actions to jealousy, anger, and constant drunkenness. Ultimately, everyone agrees with Vavinsky's assessment. The testimonies have a significant impact on the court's perception of Dmitri's mental state. Despite the variance in opinions, Vavinsky's more dismissive evaluation of Dmitri's actions as a result of jealousy, wrath, and continual drunkenness is accepted. This suggests that the court is leaning towards a more rational explanation for Dmitri's actions rather than accepting them as a consequence of a severe mental abnormality. In this chapter, we see a clear examination of the credibility and reliability of the three expert testimonies provided. Dr. Vavinsky, despite being the least experienced, gives a testimony that seems the most plausible and rational. On the other hand, Dr. Herzenstube's assessment may be tainted by his personal history with Dmitri and his sympathy for the neglect Dmitri endured during his childhood. His judgment attributes Dmitri's troubles to Fyodor's poor parenting. Lastly, the Moscow doctor's testimony overemphasizes Dmitri's fixation on the 3,000 rubles, suggesting a possible exaggeration of Dmitri's mental condition. And all the doctors are men, of course. The analysis reflects the significance of these contrasting views on Dmitri's mental state and how they may impact his case. Given that Vavinsky's more rational explanation is accepted, it highlights a preference in the court for a simpler, more understandable explanation of Dmitri's actions, rather than attributing them to more complex psychological factors. This approach potentially undermines Dmitri's defense and could be consequential for the final verdict. Alexei is called to testify, painting a sympathetic portrait of Dmitri as noble, proud, and generous. He firmly believes that Dmitri is not the murderer, pointing to Smerdyakov as the more likely culprit. This creates a dichotomy between familial loyalty and the evidence presented in the court. Fetyukovich recalls an incident where Dmitri gestured towards an amulet containing 1,500 rubles. This suggests Dmitri had the means to repay part of his debt to Katerina Ivanovna, but chose not to, further complicating the motives behind the alleged crime. Katerina Ivanovna testifies that she would have relieved Dmitri of his debt if he had approached her, adding a layer of regret and missed opportunities to the narrative. However, her testimony seems to intensify Dmitri's feeling of impending doom. Grushenka dismisses any substantial relationship with Fyodor and alleges that Smerdyakov, whom she refers to as the villain, is the true murderer. She passionately blames Katerina Ivanovna for ruining Dmitri, further polarizing the court's perception of the two women. The revelation of Grushenka's familial relationship with Rakitin discredits his testimony and weakens his earlier accusations against Dmitri. Despite Grushenka's vehement defense, the public remains skeptical, highlighting the role of public sentiment in the trial. The chapter concludes with the expected testimony from Ivan Fyodorovich, escalating the suspense in the courtroom drama. Alexei's testimony is colored by his belief in Dmitri's inherent goodness. However, his perspective might be viewed with skepticism due to his familial bias. His silence on the women's rivalry is respectful, considering the sensitive nature and public knowledge of the issue. The amulet, carrying Dmitri's monetary means to resolve his debt to Katerina Ivanovna, symbolizes his internal struggle between a desire for honor and a propensity for self-indulgence. Dmitri's inability to part with the money trapped in the amulet underscores his conflict between responsibility and passion. Katerina Ivanovna's higher social class commands respect and sympathy from the court, further contrasting with Dmitri's standing. Her recounting of the moment of the bowing to the ground contributes to Dmitri's growing feeling of condemnation. Grushenka's confession about fueling the conflict between father and son, despite painting her in a negative light, speaks volumes about her honesty. However, the fact that her faith in Dmitri's innocence is shared only by those closest to him may not help his case. Rakitin's resentment towards Dmitri and Grushenka is amplified by the reveal of his familial connection to Grushenka, his cousin. Being related to a woman perceived as dishonorable and embroiled in a scandal with the Karamazovs intensifies Rakitin's bitterness. This dynamic enriches the narrative with a deeper understanding of character motivations. Ivan presents himself in a state of confusion or distress, providing lackluster and reluctant responses to the court's inquiries. His claim about receiving the money from Smerdyakov and implicating himself in the murder only adds to the bewildering situation. Alexei jumps to Ivan's defense, insisting that his brother is delirious and his testimony should not be trusted. This highlights Alexei's unwavering belief in his family's innocence. Ivan's assertion of having a witness whom the court would find inadmissible further fuels the courtroom drama and deepens the mystery surrounding the case. Katerina Ivanovna's hysteria culminates in her presentation of Dmitri's letter as evidence of his guilt. Her assertion that she knowingly gave Dmitri money that contributed to his motive for the crime unveils her own manipulation of events, further complicating the situation. Grushenka's vehement defense of Dmitri and the chaotic scene that ensues underscores the tension in the court. The addition of the letter to the evidence against Dmitri makes for a dramatic close to this chapter of the trial. Ivan's illness is clearly affecting his ability to present a clear and cogent case against Smerdyakov, and his attempt to implicate himself in the crime may be more a symptom of his mental distress than an honest confession. His claim that Smerdyakov is the true culprit, and that he even played a role in the murder, fails to convince the court due to his incoherent state. As Ivan descends further into incoherence, referencing an inadmissible witness, Alexei tries to defend him. However, Ivan's strange and confusing testimony only serves to further discredit him in the eyes of the court. In a desperate attempt to protect Ivan, Katerina Ivanovna reveals her true feelings for him. Her emotional reaction and damning accusations against Dmitri and Grushenka both clarify her motivations and seem to solidify Dmitri's perceived guilt in the eyes of the court. The escalating drama and intense interpersonal conflicts in the courtroom turn the trial into a spectacle for the onlookers. Despite the serious nature of the case, the trial is being enjoyed as a form of entertainment by the public. Prosecutor Ippolit Kirillovich discusses how the Karamazov case has resounded throughout Russia, yet it lacks any unique horror. He ponders the reasons behind the public's indifference, attributing it to the regular exposure to similar cases. Prosecutor Ippolit Kirillovich discusses how the Karamazov case has resounded throughout Russia, yet it lacks any unique horror. He ponders the public's feigned horror towards the Karamazov case and suggests their enjoyment of the spectacle. He emphasizes that in sober reflection, society needs to understand its duty to each other. The prosecutor metaphorically portrays Russia as a troika, a Russian vehicle drawn by 3 horses abreast, speeding past, with Europe respectfully standing aside, indicating Russia's uniqueness and distinct path in the world. Ippolit Kirillovich recounts the Karamazov family history, highlighting Fyodor's dissolute lifestyle, poor parenting, and Ivan's resemblance to his father, primarily due to his cynicism. The prosecutor addresses Ivan's previous public disdain towards him, takes this opportunity to exact a small measure of revenge, and then delves into the property dispute and strained relations between Fyodor and Dmitri. Ippolit Kirillovich calls the story of the amulet containing 1,500 rubles a legend, and discusses the medical opinions concerning Dmitri's obsession with the 3,000 rubles. The prosecutor positions the case in its wider social and historical significance, arguing that the verdict in Dmitri's trial will reflect on the nation's values. He chastises the public spectatorship and the commonplace nature of the crime. Ippolit Kirillovich envisages a future where society, having learned from past mistakes, will view the current scandal as a cautionary tale. He suggests that Russia has the potential to lead Europe, invoking the now famous image of Russia as a galloping troika. The prosecutor provides a comprehensive account of the Karamazov family history, helping to explain Dmitri's current predicament. However, he gets derailed by a personal vendetta against Ivan. Kirillovich asserts without substantial evidence that Ivan closely resembles his father, echoing Smerdyakov's earlier insights. He also discredits the amulet's existence, a crucial piece in Dmitri's defense. Ippolit Kirillovich refutes the claim of Dmitri's insanity, agreeing instead with the assertion that Dmitri was embittered, and identifies jealousy stemming from his passion for Grushenka as the driving force behind his actions. The prosecutor emphasizes that the 3,000 rubles, while not intrinsically significant, represented a means to happiness for Dmitri, leading him towards contemplating murder. Ippolit Kirillovich recounts Dmitri's various efforts to obtain money without committing a crime, and suggests that the series of unfortunate events could have been prevented had Fenya informed Dmitri about Grushenka's location. In his desperation, Dmitri is believed to have seized the pestle assumed to be the murder weapon. Kirillovich aligns with Dr. Vavinsky's assessment that Dmitri was driven by emotion, but reframes it to portray Dmitri's actions as calculated and motivated by a desire for money rather than emotional distress. The prosecutor argues that Dmitri's obsession with the 3,000 rubles led to all the unfortunate events, painting a picture of Dmitri as someone willing to let others suffer for his goals. Kirillovich suggests that minor changes in the events could have prevented the crime, painting Dmitri in a somewhat sympathetic light. However, he uses this to strengthen his case, highlighting that despite circumstances, Dmitri is undeniably guilty. Prosecutor Ippolit Kirillovich emphasizes Smerdyakov's illness and reputation for cowardice, explaining that his fear may have led to his seizure when Ivan, Fyodor's protector, left for Moscow. Kirillovich acknowledges the claim that Smerdyakov might have feigned his sickness and manipulated Dmitri to commit the crime. He questions the feasibility of this theory, asking when Smerdyakov would have killed Fyodor amidst the chaos. Urging the court to focus more on facts than psychology, he underlines the need for solid evidence over speculative reasoning. The prosecutor challenges the credibility of the 3,000 rubles presented by Ivan, suggesting that its origin cannot be definitively tied to the same envelope. He further questions Ivan's delay in reporting the money, suggesting that he might have intended to use it to save his brother. The prosecutor underscores that a sensible murderer wouldn't have left the envelope behind, and suggests that Dmitri checked on Grigory's condition not out of pity, but to confirm his potential witness was dead. The prosecutor views Alexei and Ivan's support of Dmitri's claim that Smerdyakov killed Fyodor as an expression of familial loyalty and an attempt to shift blame. He utilizes common misconceptions about epilepsy to manipulate Smerdyakov's condition to his advantage. In his attempt to disprove Smerdyakov's guilt, the prosecutor inadvertently stumbles upon the truth of the murder, though his timing of the events is incorrect, as he wrongly believes that Fyodor had already been attacked when Smerdyakov could have entered the house. The prosecutor suggests that the 3,000 rubles presented by Ivan could have come from anywhere, adding doubt to their authenticity as evidence. Kirillovich questions Ivan's delay in reporting the money, not realizing it was due to Smerdyakov's reluctance to go and Ivan's subsequent illness. The narrative suggests that Dmitri's struggle to clear his name is largely due to unfortunate circumstances, underlining the impact of chance or misfortune on our lives. Ippolit Kirillovich portrays Dmitri as a man entrenched in the present, who, in his desperation, sought refuge in his romantic fantasies about Grushenka. He suggests that Dmitri's retrieval of his pistols was a symptom of feeling cornered by his crime, and that his reluctance to commit suicide was fueled by his intense passion for Grushenka, which overrode his fear of arrest. Kirillovich contends that Dmitri's admission of guilt for Grigory's alleged murder was a calculated move to gain the authorities' trust, and points out the unaccounted-for amulet and the missing torn shirt as proof inconsistencies. In his closing remarks, he appeals to the jury's sense of duty, reminding them that Europe is watching Russia's judgment of parricide, implying the weight and significance of their decision. The prosecutor's speech is received with widespread approval despite anticipation of Fetyukovich's rebuttal. Kirillovich posits that Dmitri, akin to a child or a sensualist insect, focuses solely on immediate gratification, often at the expense of others. Grushenka is presented as the singular force that prompts Dmitri to contemplate the future and envision a life beyond his reckless indulgences. The prosecutor constructs a compelling case against Dmitri by exposing the flaws in all evidence purportedly supporting his innocence. In a grand finale, he frames an acquittal of Dmitri as a vote against Russia's secure future. Thus, he positions the Karamazov case, interlaced with dilemmas of modernization and westernization, as a litmus test for the moral integrity and practical wisdom of Russia's peasants, on whom the public pins its hopes. Fetyukovich opens his defense with a powerful voice that immediately captivates the court. His argument bifurcates into an intense critique and refutation of the accusations levied against Dmitri in the first part, followed by an impassioned plea that leaves the courtroom shuddering with emotion. Positioning himself as an outsider, Fetyukovich paints Dmitri as a man of impulsive and unrestrained temperament. He takes issue with Kirillovich's argument that Dmitri lacked sensitivity towards Grigory post-attack, positing instead that Dmitri's pity sprung from a clear conscience, not a murderer's obsession with self-preservation. Fetyukovich, employing a captivatingly resonant voice, structures his speech into two halves, The first part mercilessly critiques and contests the charges against Dmitri, while the second part leans heavily into emotional appeal, swaying the courtroom to a state of palpable anticipation. The defense attorney introduces himself as a newcomer, describes Dmitri as a man of unbridled and tumultuous character, and challenges Kirillovich's interpretation of Dmitri's actions post Grigory's assault. Fetyukovich suggests that Dmitri's apparent compassion originates from an innocent conscience, rather than the self-preserving calculations of a murderer. Fetyukovich makes a bold claim, arguing that there's no definitive evidence that the 3,000 rubles even existed. He emphasizes that the supposed crime scene was left undisturbed, which contradicts the prosecution's claim that Dmitri took the money from under the mattress, and questions the validity of the envelope found on the floor as evidence of theft. The defense lawyer stands by Dmitri's statement about the source of the 1,500 rubles, suggesting that Katerina Ivanovna's later testimony may have been exaggerated by a vengeful spirit. Further, Fetyukovich contends that there cannot be an accusation of theft if it's impossible to ascertain what was allegedly stolen. Finally, he underscores the unproven nature of the charge that Dmitri killed his father without any robbery taking place. Fetyukovich ingeniously reinterprets the money as a matter of legend, similar to the prosecution's depiction of the amulet. The defense questions whether the money ever existed at all, presenting a narrative that echoes the uncertainty and folklore surrounding the amulet. By employing this tactic, Fetyukovich subtly highlights the potential fallibility of the prosecution's argument. In a move to further weaken the prosecution's case, the defense attorney attempts to discredit Katerina Ivanovna, presenting her as a scorned woman influenced by feelings of vengeance. This portrayal not only diverts suspicion from Dmitri, but also introduces a gender stereotype that might sway the jury's perceptions of her reliability. Fetyukovich disputes the notion that the pestle is a symbol of Dmitri's premeditated intent to commit murder. He argues that Dmitri's threats to kill his father were merely common, idle talk, not substantial proof of intent. Fetyukovich revisits the events of the night at Mokroe, emphasizing Dmitri's distress over injuring Grigory and his contemplation of suicide. He challenges the prosecution's interpretation of events, arguing that his perspective is equally valid. Fetyukovich reintroduces Smerdyakov as a viable suspect. He provides a character assessment that contradicts the prosecution's depiction of Smerdyakov as guileless, suggesting instead that he was ambitious, envious, and resentful. Fetyukovich implores the jury to seek out any errors in his account and insists that there's more than a shadow of doubt in Dmitri's guilt. He urges them to render a sincere judgment, a plea that is met with enthusiastic applause. Fetyukovich correctly suggests that everyday threats to kill are often empty and do not equate to genuine intent. This puts into perspective Dmitri's public threats against his father, framing them as idle talk. The defense attorney's account aligns with Dmitri's primary focus on the fateful night, finding Grushenka. His deep guilt over injuring Grigory further supports the argument that he didn't kill his father, as this indicates his remorse for violent actions. Fetyukovich revises the portrayal of Smerdyakov, presenting him as a disgruntled individual, resentful of his unchangeable fate and disillusioned with his country. This provides a more plausible image of Smerdyakov than the guileless one presented by the prosecution. Fetyukovich's approach involves providing several hypotheses to sow doubt regarding Dmitri's guilt. Despite the non-linearity of his argument, which might seem less successful than the prosecution's straightforward narrative, his aim is to highlight the lack of solid evidence for both murder and robbery charges against Dmitri. Fetyukovich argues that the charge of parricide has unfairly prejudiced the case against Dmitri. Without this charge, he believes the jury would dismiss the case due to the fanciful nature of the evidence. The defense attorney then portrays Fyodor as a neglectful and dishonorable father who mistreated Dmitri since his childhood, aiming to elicit sympathy for the defendant. The defense further argues that Dmitri did not break into Fyodor's house with the intention of murder. His impulsive grab of the pestle was a response to an immediate threat, not premeditated homicide. Fetyukovich suggests Dmitri's action was a burst of justifiable rage against his father, who had been antagonistic towards him since childhood. However, Dmitri still did not commit the act of murder. Lastly, Fetyukovich disputes the prosecution's metaphor of Russia as a mad troika. Instead, he portrays the country as a dignified chariot, with the jury holding the reins of Russian truth, a responsibility that he implores them to uphold. Fetyukovich retraces Dmitri's history, emphasizing the appalling treatment he received from his father, Fyodor. The defense seeks to create a sense of understanding and even sympathy for Dmitri, painting a picture of a child growing up in neglectful and morally corrupt surroundings, which led to his contempt for his father and his flawed adulthood. In a departure from the prosecution's single-minded focus on guilt, Fetyukovich presents a range of possibilities that either point to Dmitri's innocence or suggest lesser charges such as manslaughter. These alternative narratives serve to introduce doubt and uncertainty into the jury's decision-making process. Fetyukovich also employs the metaphor of Russia as a troika, much like his opponent did. However, he uses this image to assert that the trial's outcome will reflect on the fate of the country, thus impressing upon the jury the magnitude of their responsibility. At the end of Fetyukovich's compelling speech, Ippolit Kirillovich rises to voice his objection, citing that the defense has concocted an equally fictional narrative, just as they accused the prosecution of doing. Kirillovich criticizes the defense's portrayal of Smerdyakov as a Byronic hero, and questions the logic of Dmitri's intended murder that supposedly did not result in an actual killing. Dmitri, the accused, takes the stand and vehemently denies his guilt. He implores the court to spare him, offering a personal plea that reveals his fear and desperation. After the jury deliberates for precisely 1 hour, they return with the verdict, guilty. The pronouncement sends the courtroom into an uproar, with reactions ranging from satisfaction to shock. Dmitri responds to the verdict with anguished protestations of his innocence. He displays an unexpected generosity towards Katerina Ivanovna, offering her forgiveness, and pleads for empathy towards Grushenka. The discussion of his expected punishment, hard labor in the mines, and the apparent satisfaction of some bystanders underscore the severity and finality of the verdict. Despite the diverse set of possibilities and scenarios Fetyukovich presents, his oratorical skills captivate his audience. Interestingly, his most implausible story aligns with the truth, highlighting the complexity of the case and the gap between public perception and reality. Dmitri's plea for mercy underscores his fear of potential lifelong separation from Grushenka. His appeal starkly contrasts his earlier admission of guilt regarding his moral failings, indicating a shift in his mindset. The audience, particularly the women, continue to empathize with Dmitri due to their romanticized perception of his crimes. Dmitri's forgiveness towards Katerina Ivanovna illustrates his emotional growth and a sense of grace in adversity. The class dynamics also become apparent as the peasants play a crucial role in determining Dmitri's fate, signaling an emerging shift in societal power structures. The peasants' verdict, regarded as a moral judgment, inadvertently supports Kirillovich's vision of a disciplined and pious Russia. Ironically, this perceived moral victory is flawed, as the verdict is incorrect. This moment indicates potential societal conflicts and transformations in the coming era. The verdict echoes, its blunt finality leaving disquiet in its wake. Though the majesty of law shone briefly, injustice mars its polished facade. For justice framed in abstractions loses sight of truth's intricate shape. Blind to private torment, it cannot fathom the depth of each soul's reckoning. Yet mercy stirs in spaces where certainty falters, and conscience, weighing deeds with clearer sight, may yet bring reconciliation beyond the courtroom's narrow scope. There remain glimmers of hope amid failure's ashes, bonds revived in adversity, faith refined when challenged. From the friction of conflict, insight sparks. Thus we depart subdued yet uplifted, reminded of justice that courses deeper than verdicts. It flows in understanding born of love, and quiet acts of conscience navigating truth's grey waters. The courtroom was abuzz as Ippolit Kirillovich, known as the prosecutor, made his entrance. His polished boots and confident stride hid his frailty, both in health and pride. The Dmitry Karamazov case was his opportunity, his chance for national acclaim. Despite his intelligence, Kirillovich's overwhelming pride and ambition often clouded his judgment. He believed he had the Karamazov case cracked, his name soon to be revered among Russia's legal elite. But as the trial progressed, whispers grew. His accusations were driven more by ego than evidence, and while he sought to judge Dmitry, the court of public opinion judged him. Months later, tuberculosis claimed him, but not before the Karamazov case etched his legacy, a brilliant mind undone by unchecked ambition, a symbol of justice's imperfections. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted palpably with Fetyukovich's entrance. Standing tall, bird-like, and reserved, he cut a figure of quiet authority. At 40, his fame had spread across Russia, a beacon of legal acumen. His thin lips rarely spoke more than necessary, yet when they did, there was no artifice or show. Fetyukovich relied on facts and genuine reasoning, not the flowery or aggressive rhetoric of his counterparts. Dmitry might have doubted his lawyer's belief in his innocence, but Fetyukovich's defense was solid, grounded in the reality of events. As Dmitry's defense, Fetyukovich became the foil to the proud prosecutor, his honest approach emphasizing the rift between genuine defense and theatrical prosecution. In him, Dostoevsky painted the image of true legal integrity, steadfast, truthful, devoid of pomp and vanity. This evening we delve into the many layers of justice as unraveled in the compelling trial of Mitya. With us are philosopher John Rawls, the unwavering prosecutor Ippolit Kirillovich, and the fervent defender Fetyukovich.
To truly grasp justice, we must attempt to view it through the veil of ignorance. Imagine not knowing your status or role in society. How might this influence the outcomes of a trial such as Mitya's?
Philosophical exercises have value, but we're dealing with the tangible, immediate reality of Mitya's trial. Concrete evidence and irrefutable facts must steer our judgment.
But Kirillovich, justice also encompasses the human spirit. Mitya's moments of vulnerability during the trial bear testimony to his struggles. Shouldn't this humanity factor into our understanding of justice?
How then do we strike this balance between objective fact and subjective emotion, especially given the societal perceptions surrounding Mitya's case?
Evidence, facts, logic. These remain the pillars. The courtroom cannot be swayed by society's drama or emotional appeals.
Yet, every juror carries with them a conscience. Beyond evidence, true justice taps into the heart's recesses, seeking truth in both tangible facts and the more elusive human emotions.
Let me introduce another layer to this. What role do societal institutions play in shaping our understanding of justice? Our beliefs, after all, don't exist in a vacuum, but are informed by our surroundings.
Institutions offer a framework, ensuring that justice is consistent and not merely swayed by passing sentiments.
But institutions are also shaped by people, by collective consciousness. They too evolve as our understanding of morality and justice evolves.
Exactly. While institutions provide a foundation, individual and collective introspections refine our societal norms. It's this continuous dialogue between the individual, society, and institutions that defines our evolving concept of justice.
In this intricate interplay of facts, emotions, and societal constructs, we journey towards a justice that speaks to both mind and soul. A heartfelt thank you to our distinguished guests for this deep dive. Let's hear what a group of existentialists might have said about Book 12. Known for her analysis of love and desire, Salome might view Dmitri, Katerina, and Grushenka's complex love triangle as a manifestation of conflicting desires. Katerina's oscillating testimony could symbolize her internal battle between love for Dmitri and feelings of betrayal. Focused on life's inherent absurdity, Camus could see Dmitri's trial and conviction, despite fervent claims of innocence, as an epitome of life's irrationality and injustice, reflecting the harsh absurdities of human existence. Kristeva, attentive to the symbolic dimensions of language, might view the trial's dialogues, testimonies, and character actions as complex sign systems revealing deeper identity layers. Dmitri's plea for innocence and Ivan's mental disarray could symbolize a struggle for authentic identity and the collapse of personal symbolic order, respectively. Arendt would likely view the trial as a vivid display of public sphere power dynamics, exemplifying how authority and truth are constructed and contested within societal structures. Dmitri's fate, dictated by court discourse, would resonate with her views on power and truth in public life. Jaspers might see Dmitri's guilty verdict as a boundary situation, a critical life event prompting existential transformation. Dmitri's lawyer's assertion that prisons should reform, not punish, would echo Jasper's belief in self-transformation through confronting existential realities. Marcel could see the painful dynamics between Dmitri, Katerina, and Grushenka as embodiments of personal betrayals, reflecting our innate desire for unity, truth, and full being, a desire often thwarted in reality, illustrating his concept of the broken world. Finally, let's see how we could relate John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis to Book 12. The crowd's expectation and interpretation of the events during Dmitri's trial can be seen as a form of relevance realization. Everyone attending the trial, whether they support Dmitri or not, filters the events through their own perspectives and biases, attributing relevance to certain aspects of the case. In everyday language, the audience in the courtroom is deciding what matters most about the case based on their own beliefs and opinions. The characters in the courtroom, such as Dmitri, his lawyer, Katerina, and Alyosha, are not treated as having fixed essences by the crowd and the jury. Their perception of these characters shifts based on their actions and words, showing that there isn't a fixed essence to their identities, but rather a fluid and dynamic understanding. In everyday language, people in the courtroom don't see Dmitri or others as being one fixed way. Their opinions of them change based on what they say or do. Many individuals in the courtroom generalize Dmitri's character based on his actions and rumors about him, assuming a level of homogeneity and stability in his character. These assumptions influence their perception of his guilt or innocence. In everyday language, people in the courtroom are making assumptions about Dmitri based on what they've heard about him, expecting him to act consistently according to these assumptions. The theories, arguments, and evidence presented during the trial can be seen as attempts to explain how each character fits into the environment of the courtroom and the story. This includes Dmitri's defense and Katerina's shifting testimony, which both serve to adapt their narrative fittedness to the evolving circumstances. In everyday language, the defense and prosecution are trying to present the best case possible in the changing situation of the trial. The lawyer's attempt to discredit the witnesses and argue for Dmitri's innocence is a demonstration of trying to maintain an efficient and resilient argument amidst an unpredictable trial. Similarly, Katerina's changing testimony can be seen as an effort to maintain resiliency in her position. In everyday language, Dmitri's lawyer and Katerina are trying to adapt and respond to the ups and downs of the trial to make their case as strong as possible.
Okay, he is convicted as guilty of a murder he did not commit. And we can't end here, can we? We still have a lot of questions to sort out. And that's what happens in the epilogue. Follow me along.